Right, Rook endgames active king. The last video was Rook endgames active rook, and Dvoretsky talks about how active rook sort of ranks above everything, including active king. So that game from somewhere in the 1930s where to activate their rook, black should have brought their king to a silly square to defend some pawns just to get the rook into the game, basically. But if your rook's already active, then active king obviously comes pretty soon behind that, and you can see in this position both rooks are pretty active, like the white rook's attacking a pawn, the black rook's attacking, I guess, ready to gobble up two pawns, and both kings are sort of central-ish. It's black to play. This is a game from 1991. What should black do here? Should we defend this pawn? Should we give that pawn a miss and go after these pawns? What should we do? If we defend the pawn, rook b5, white gets active with their king, king f4, we might see king f6, g4. What does black do next? So, yeah, we really don't want a rook just stuck on b5 defending that a pawn. I mean, that's your king's all right, I suppose, on f6, but that is not an active rook all of a sudden. So not rook b5. This pawn's gone. Don't worry about this pawn. Let's just start gobbling up these pawns. But it's not great. Rook takes g2. It leads fairly quickly to a draw. One of the problems is that black kind of wants to check the white king on the third rank and then move the white king back. So rook takes a5, and the problem is we can't see that check on the third rank. So king f6 doesn't really prepare it. You try and get your king into e5. There's no check happening. Black grabs that pawn. We might see a check. King f6, rook d7, king e5, rook e7, and then we'd probably get some sort of perpetual. This white rook to the 7th rank, attacking that d pawn, and then checking on e7 when the black king defends on e5 is sort of an annoying thing, and it's really sort of the main defensive trick that white should have used in this position. So defending this pawn doesn't get us anywhere. Coming and gobbling up these pawns doesn't get us anywhere either. In the game, king f6 was played, exclamation mark. It's getting a king into e5, and if you can force the white king back and gobble up these two pawns, then we're cooking with this pass c pawn. And white plays rook takes a5, which isn't a blunder yet, but probably a better move would be come and meet that black king, king f4. It's a bit weird actually, because if white takes on a5, then black can take on g2 straight away. But you kind of want the rook as white on that side. It's like you've lost a tempo by playing king f4. Rook f2, and then you don't put your king on g3, because then one of the things that an active rook does, remember, is cuts off the enemy king. That black king's coming into e5. This is very bad news for white now. Although the engine's got that as still fairly even, actually. Apparently white can still hold that, but yeah, you don't want your king getting cut off. So instead, king e3. Then the pawn gets taken, but white's got time to do this, because if black comes into e5 with the king, there is no check on the third rank. So we just go and set up the rook d7, rook e7, perpetual again. And if instead of bringing the king in, black just gobbles up this pawn, I mean, they haven't brought their king into e5 yet, so we still go after the d pawn. And the only way that black can defend that d pawn, other than allowing the perpetual, is to play something like rook h6. We attack it anyway. The king's got to go back to g7, otherwise it's going to be rook e7 check. I suppose it could come to g5 thinking about it, but then we could just nab the f pawn, I suppose. What would you play here as white? Active king. Bosh. This is just going to lead very quickly to a draw. E-pawn's hit. Black might think to defend it. White goes after the c-pawn. Black's got to be careful, actually. That looks a bit of a nasty threat coming through. So And the engine does say it's drawn, but bit of care required. I imagine it. I'm going to look at some moves, a couple of moves down the line. I'm expecting to see a Rook H8 in there somewhere. But yeah, so I'm just interested. What happens if you push those black to move? It's just saying push the C pawn. Oh, okay. Can that not be taken? That can't be taken, can it? Because, yeah, black's going to win that king and pawn ending. That's interesting. So just push the C pawn one way to the draw. Anyway, so that was... where did we get to with that? That was rook takes a5 and black just carrying on playing Pac-Man with those pawns. So, yeah, that's probably what white should have done in this position. Should have played king f4 to come and meet that black king. In the game, rook takes a5 was played. Not a losing move yet. And the black king comes into e5. And now this is the, again, still not a losing move, but made it very, very hard for white after this next move. So the white rook disappeared off to a7, but the difference is it's sort of like losing a tempo was good for black. Like as in, not losing a tempo for white has ended up sort of being detrimental to them, because before we had the rook on g2 that couldn't go to g3 with check, and now can come to b3 with check. And, I mean, this is already a big advantage for black now. But you'll be hard-pressed to work out what white should do here and why. I still don't think I understand why. There's a lot of very, very hard variations coming up in this rook endgame. But someone pointed out that why not just defend the e-pawn? Like, again, we don't mind losing a tempo, because then we can do this, and there is no check on the third rank. And if black says, well, all right, I'll just wait around, we can just wait around. And as soon as black disappears somewhere where they can't check on the third rank, we come up and we're threatening checkmate there, actually. So black's only got one move that doesn't get checkmated, which is f5. Check, check, completely drawn. So back in this position, white should have hung around and not allowed their king to be driven back. Just defend the e-pawn, and yeah, I mean, the black can't really do as much damage from there. Their active king isn't going to be as good. Anyway, rook a7 was played. Mistake from a human perspective. Still drawn according to the engine just, or it's a -0.5. What would you play here? In the game, king f2 was played. I cannot for the life of me think why I wouldn't play king f2. I think I'm going to have to really think about these endgames. And king e2 apparently is the move that should be played. Wow, you just really wouldn't think to put your king there, would you? Opposite where the black king takes that pawn. But yeah, this is still drawing chances apparently. Okay, king f2 was played. King takes e4, and yeah, and now white's in trouble. Rook takes f7 was played in the game, but if instead they just got on with pushing the h pawn, which, you know, this is one line we might see: rook b2 check, king g3, c4, h5, c3, rook behind the c pawn. King comes in to defend the c pawn. That's going to be the difference in this pawn race, is that the black rook can just stop the white h pawn, but the white rook can't stop the c pawn because it's supported by black's king. So that's just obviously completely over. Anyway, so rook takes f7 played, also losing. But black doesn't play the only winning move here. So it's really hard to see like some of these only winning moves, and this was the only move to draw it. It's just a minefield. At my level, there's just no chance of finding all these only winning moves. All you can do, I think, is keep putting yourself in a place where there are more winning moves, and just keep, following the principle of the active king. Like, I've understood this position to the point of we shouldn't have allowed the black king into e5 in the way that white did in this game. And afterwards, the fact that there's only one drawing move here and there, it's incredibly hard to see. I mean, for example, who sees king e2 there? Really, really hard spot. I think we're just sort of into engine stuff, aren't we, really? Rook takes f7. Rook b2 check is a mistake because it lets the white king out, and black should just get on with it. That's their only winning move, c4. Rook behind the c-pawn, c3, h4, king into d3, h5, and it's pretty similar to the line we just saw in that, yeah, the black rook can always stop this pawn, and the white rook can't really stop this one because the black king is supporting it. h7 would see rook h1, I presume. Yep. Anyway, so rook b2 check played, bit of a lifeline, king g3, c4, rook behind the c-pawn, and it's now drawn. It's objectively just drawn. Black's going to defend this pawn, and it makes sense, of course, to defend it with the king. Now, what move would you play here as black? In the game, the player with the black pieces played the move that I absolutely would play without even thinking about it, I reckon. It's very hard to see why that's not necessarily the best try for the win, although they won, so fine. Which is just king d3. Okay. I mean, I think I'm sort of happy understanding that taking that pawn is not actually that important a pawn. And now white can get their pawns going, and we've even got a g pawn to support. I'm hopefully going to end up in a drawn version of rook versus pawn or something there. So not snatching the pawn. But king d3 played, fine. h4, losing move. What white needed to do was come and snatch the d pawn. Okay, check this variation out. So rook c6 was the way to draw this. c3, snatch the d pawn. If black just carries on pushing that c-pawn, we come back to c6. Sure, black can try and deflect that rook, but there's plenty of places on the c-file to not allow that deflection. And yeah, I mean, your rook's about to go, but there's easily enough there with the king and the pawns to draw that afterwards. Or black could try here, given that it's pretty clear that you're going to be coming back to the c-file and giving up your rook for their c-pawn. Black could try just coming and getting the d-pawn. You've got to come back to the c-file and let this go. And start pushing the pawns, c2, just take it. And this is a drawn version of rook versus pawns. Again, I mean, investigate it if you like, but yeah, it is. I guess go and look at a rook versus pawns video, and I guess white does shouldering to get the draw, but black can easily do enough there to not lose that, obviously. So yeah, rook c6 was needed to come and snatch the d-pawn. Instead, white plays h4. Okay, so just remember that in this position here, black's played king d3, and white plays h4, which is a mistake, and they should have played rook c6 to come and grab the d-pawn. So h4 is a mistake. Rook c6 is correct. Just hold that thought, and then we'll see how the game played out. h4, c3, h5, c2, h6, rook b1. We've already seen lines similar to this. There's not a lot more to say actually on this. Queen, g4, check, king g5, king e4, king g6, rook behind the g pawn, and yeah, white resigned there. I guess you might be wondering why not push the h pawn, because then after the check, maybe king back to h5, but we can always just drop back and come and take with a check, whatever's on the h file or whatever afterwards. So yeah, so white just resigned there. So let's go back to this h4 move. Remember, that was a mistake because white should have come and snatched this d pawn and then gone back. And what this means is back in this position, instead of king d3, black should play king d4, deliberately losing a tempo. There's all sorts of mad stuff in this endgame where sides sort of deliberately lose a tempo because they sort of wait to see what their opponent does. And now, rook c6 is a mistake and h4 is the correct move. What's the problem with rook c6? You could pause the video actually if you wanted to. And what's so special about king d4? What's black's added trick that makes the rook c6 snatch the d pawn back to the c file. Why does that plan fail with the king on d4, not on d3? Well, let's have a look. Hopefully you've worked out it's interference. Interference. We've left the third rank free to deliver a check. That's the important bit. C pawn gets pushed. Snatch the d pawn. c2. Back to the c file. There's your check. There's your block. Completely won for black. And that's why, after king d4, because black's not come to support their c pawn all the way to c1, white should just get on with it with h4. I mean, the variations after this, they're just mad, to be honest. Black, I mean, Dvoretsky analyses them all. c3, white has only one drawing move here. Only one. I mean, I'll go through it, but to me, it's just... I'm at the point now where I don't think I'm learning anything. I think it's just sort of interesting. I don't know if I'd find this move in a game if something similar happened. But yeah, it's not h5. The black king can come in, king d3, h6, c2, king f4, rook b1. Notice how the king didn't want to leave the defense of g2 until the rook was blocked from taking it. g4, queen, and that's going to be incredibly similar to the game, to be honest. In fact, I think that almost is the game. It's very incredibly similar to the game. And that would be over. Fine. So the move that white should play here, just to get the g-pawn rolling, but not drop it, is king f3. And now if black carries on with c2, then you play king f4. Was that the only... It's the only drawing move. It's incredible, isn't it? So you play king f3 first, so you're threatening to get the g-pawn rolling, and when black plays c2, then you can play king f4 and just activate that king. And we might see this sort of thing. And this is just drawn. Oh, that's quite an interesting one, that one, actually. Apparently it would end in a sort of perpetual around there. Yeah, really interesting endgame, and some of those variations, they're just beyond me, to be honest. It's just, it's too much. It's way above my ability, some of the subtleties of some of those variations. But what's not above me, and hopefully not above anyone watching this video, is rook b5 is passive rook. That doesn't help. Rook takes g2 is sort of too materialistic when we needed to be thinking about activating our king. And in the game, black activates their king, and it pays off for them. You know, white grabs the pawn, king into e5, and instead of playing rook a4, rook a7, check, king drops back to f2, which is a losing move. Yeah, I mean, it's madness, but king e2 was the way to draw it. Takes the pawn, and it is now lost. Okay, black should play c4 and just come in with their king and finish white off. I think that's fairly understandable. In the game, rook b2 check was played, which was a mistake because it let the white king run away to support these pawns in an eventual rook versus pawn situation. I think that's understandable. Some of the variations after that, they're beyond me. But interesting though, all that sort of losing a move. I like the interference trick as well. I guess we could be on the lookout for that interference trick in our games. In different situations, the interference trick could be on our radar. But as for finding all those, the only winning moves and the only drawing moves, nah, not for me. Right. White to play. This is a game from 1931. What would you do? What do you think of this? How active is that king? Again, both rooks pretty active, which is the priority, remember, from the last video. But active king, also important. In the game, I don't understand this move at all. I really don't. I think the move white should have played is fairly obvious. But white takes the pawn. And now the king's gone back to the back rank. Objectively, this is still drawn, but I just do not understand that first move. I really don't understand it. It's so obvious we've got this intermezzo to clear the f3 square and then take the h-pawn. Just keep the white king active. Why would you not do that? And it's a very easy draw. You know, we can get the g-pawn moving straight away. We can earmark the rook for the c-pawn. It's just a draw. And we can also hassle the black king with checks. I mean, it was still drawn even after white allowed their king to get cut off on the back rank like this. Anyway, obviously you take black now. Black has an active rook and an active king. Rook e7 check, king d3, rook d7 check, king c2, and now white plays the losing move. Okay, so it's still objectively drawn. What would you do here as white? I reckon maybe the player with the white pieces didn't play this because it would almost be admitting that they shouldn't have played rook takes h7 a minute ago. Bit of pride maybe kicked in. So yeah, they just left their king on the back rank and just went after another pawn. And it's just too slow. This pawn on c3 on the c file is just too dangerous. King b1. What on earth does white do here? Rook f1. Black played rook h2. There's plenty of winning moves there, but rook h2 is a pretty good one. And white, of course, resigned. But if we go back to here, we've allowed this king to become passive and cut off on the back rank. Black's just cut off, you know, the rook's control of that second rank. It was time to run away. Okay, the king has been set free by king c2, c3, rook behind the c pawn, check. King goes off to help out the pawns over there. Rook h2, h4, c2, king into f4. We might see a check. King e5, and yeah, we're going to be losing the rook for the c pawn here, but it's going to be a drawn version of rook versus pawn. There it is. It's going to be a draw. Next, this is a game from 1983. It is black to play. Pause the video, have a long think about the position, see if you can work out what's going on and what therefore black should play. So black's king is in the middle of the board, which is usually quite a good sign, except that it has no squares. And black's got to be very, very careful here. They don't get checkmated. I mean, for example, a ridiculous move would be b5, allowing rook c5 checkmate. That's obviously no one would have been thinking of that move. But this king is kind of got the potential to immediately become so active, like this annoying e3 pawn, for example, hint hint. If that wasn't protecting d4 with my strange colour scheme, then it's sort of similar to the last game where the king came into e5 and it was gobbling up on e4 and d5 and pushing the past c pawn. You know, just if you could release the sort of the mating net hold, the strangle that's going on in the middle of the board, that king becomes just so active, and all of a sudden, you know, black's doing very well. In fact, black's going to draw this game very easily. Black's only got one move that does draw this game very easily. Everything else loses. So in the game, g takes h4 was played, and then the guy resigned at the same time, which is obviously quite amusing to just play a move and then resign whilst you're waiting for your opponent to play something back. I mean, I don't know the time lapse on that one, to be honest, because like white's surely, if someone plays that, I would be going to grab my g3 pawn to take back. He's obviously played it and then and then just resigned. Again, he just resigned here, because what does he do? He just realises it's completely hopeless. His king's just stuck in the middle of the board, and white can use that to sort of come through the middle. If black just does nothing, the white rook's round the back, check. We might see these sorts of moves. I mean, this is just curtains, isn't it? And that's +4. Or if black comes to the G file, tries to do something over here, A4, trying to deflect the B pawn, by the way, to get that rook c5 checkmate in. Back to the A file. Rook c8. I mean, black could take this pawn, and we could see something similar. Rook d8 check. The engine's now saying king c4 or king c6. King c6 would presumably still come in and take the e pawn. King c4, we can still come and take the e pawn. It's just gone. If rook back to a7, what did I suggest here? Rook c8, yeah, that was taken on a4. If black just does nothing again, check, king into c4. There's even d5 in this position on top of rook d6, but rook d6 is a perfectly sensible move. So back to the original position, we might think to play g4 check, king into f4. That hasn't helped. Engine reckons plus 5.5. So well done if you worked out that it's got to be f4. I mean, you've got to keep an eye on this, by the way. You've got to quickly check that's not checkmate, and it's not king takes d4, of course. But it is the e pawn's defense of d4 that just opens up this position, and all of a sudden this king that's in the middle of the board, completely strangled and about to get checkmated, or used. The threat of checkmate used to come and grab this e-pawn, it suddenly becomes really quite active. Hence, being in this video, being in the active king section of Dvoretsky's book. What are White's options? We've got G takes f4, g4 check, king back, king into e4. Now look at this king compared to this one. Okay. If E takes f4, the d pawn's gone. Attack the rook. That rook's got to move. I mean, I presume rook c7, even rook c6, we can take this with check. So rook b3, is rook b3 the best move? And then we've got g4 check, and yeah, it's fine. And if white takes on g5, then we can take on e3. Again, we're threatening king takes d4. King takes e3, we come to the g file and pick up the g pawn. Completely drawn. Rook d6 check, king into e4, and yeah, white's not getting anywhere there. So it was fairly straightforward really. Just any move other than f4, and this king is not active, and black loses. f4, that king becomes active, and black holds up easily. Right, last but not least, not a simple example, but a short example as compared to that first game, which had all those really hard to follow variations in my view. This is black to play. What should black do here? In the game, black snatched the a pawn. And now they've lost. What should white do here? This is good. Rook endgame technique. Active rook. We use our rook, an active rook, to support our passed pawns. That's one of the things an active rook does. It attacks enemy pawns, supports our own passed pawns, cuts off the enemy king, sometimes even goes after the enemy king. Those are the 4 things on that list that an active rook does. You haven't got a list for this video, you've just got a picture of Humpty Dumpty, as far as I can tell. That was my best attempt at a picture of an active king. You stick your rook behind the pawn that's furthest away from the black king that's getting over to defend, and the black king sort of desperately tries to get over to defend, but it's gone. d7 check is threatened. Rook d3 and rook c6. I think this pattern reminds me of one of the ways you win, in that it's the rook and 2 pawns, the knight and the rook's pawn, against the rook and the king in the Klingenhorwitz setup, which should be a draw, but if black gets greedy and grabs the g pawn at the wrong time, you get something similar to this going on from memory. I think it reminded me of that. It reminded me of something. Anyway, this is over. White's got nothing against either of those 2 plans. Shifting the rook over, and yeah, we're going to be getting a queen the black rook's going to be, in fact, you might as well just take that. That's probably the best move according to the engine. The engine reckons a5, a5. Then it reckons white should just wait with h5. I wouldn't play that. I wouldn't have the guts to play that. I would be playing this. And yeah, then it reckons black needs to lose the rook. So yeah, we're a rook down. Let's not get sidetracked by that. So what black should have done is activate this king. I mean, you don't want to do it straight away because the e-pawn's falling with check if you bring the king over. But instead, if you bring the rook behind the c-pawn, which has then got to get pushed, then we activate the king. E-pawn's gone with check, fine. King into d6. And you could just see it looks better. It just looks better, doesn't it? We've got the rook stopping the c-pawn. I mean, white's got to be careful, by the way. If they sort of shift the rook this way and it gets stuck on the king side, defending the d-pawn, black's got this plan. Careful. got to be really careful there. I mean, the engine says draw after rook f5, but fine. Anyway, so I'm just going to pause and read the section what Dvoretsky says about active king, because I think it's sort of informative. Yeah, so he writes that the importance of an active king's position does not require detailed explanations. A few practical examples are enough. So, and then he shows those few practical examples that I've just been through there. Right, let's stop it there.